Hey, welcome to the DudeFax podcast. We hope you pledge allegiance to us, minions. I'm just kidding. We do hope that you're listening still and you haven't turned us off. This is our July 4th Freedom America Fireworks Celebration Extravaganza podcast. And we're going to be talking a lot about freedom. What kind of freedom do we have as Americans? And more specifically, what does freedom in Christ look like? And how do those two things intertwine with each other? So glad you're here. Fire up the grill. It's going to be fun. Welcome to the DudeFax podcast. We're four guys who in the past all served in the same youth ministry together. Now, more than 10 years later, 10 years older, but not really 10 years more mature, we felt it was time to join forces once again. So now we create weekly podcasts dealing with pop culture, ministry, and church life, and mixed all throughout is a healthy dose of the humor you would only expect from old youth pastors. So if you love Jesus, the local church, and laughter, you're going to fit right in. We encourage you to sit back, relax, grab an ice cold Dr. Pepper, and enjoy this week's episode of the DudeFax podcast. We're glad that you're here with us. It's going to be a fun episode, as they all are. But primarily compared to last week, because we're not talking about hell, right? But we are talking about America, and we're talking about freedom and Christian freedom, and kind of getting down to some of the nitty-gritty on that and seeing what it looks like to live as believers in the freedom of Christ and also in a country that apparently gives us a lot of freedom. So I'm looking forward to that. That's right. Thank you, Nacho. But before we jump into any of that, we just kind of want to catch up. We don't always do this, but I know that there might be some new listeners. My name is Josh, and on our podcast is Ryan and Jeff. There's usually a fourth here. His name doesn't matter because he's not here tonight. But his name's Grant. We love
He's named after a president. He's not here.
Oh, yeah. That's true. Man, I didn't think about that. And grape juice company.
Yep.
Grant Welch.
And a $50 bill.
It took me too long.
Ocean Spray?
Yeah. His middle name? I don't know.
It is good to have you guys here with us. I'm talking about you two, not the people listening.
Oh.
Although I'm glad
the people
they're
listening. There's probably only two, right?
There may only be two there as well. How's it been for you guys? We have moved past the Celtics beating the Mavericks.
I haven't.
You haven't?
I've moved past them. That's why.
Yeah.
I had to let the Peagle fly today. So
yeah. What is that?
That's the Texas Rangers City Connect. Their mascot for that is the Peagle.
That's a really cool hat.
Yeah. I got it when I was visiting my family a few weeks ago.
Yeah. That's slick, man.
Let's go Peagle.
Yeah.
I like it.
Show me your Peagleness.
Ooh.
We're just having to deal with Bronny James news now.
Mm-hmm.
Just like an hour ago, he
I'm
was
still processing it.
Drafted by the Lakers. So now, we get LeBron and his son together.
You know, the good news of that is it takes LeBron to the Mavs off the table.
That's true.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. So Seiko is going to explode.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
I mean, just LeBron loving overload.
Seiko, I want to know what you think about them drafting Bronny. Because, Jeff, you said he averaged how many points?
Like 4.8 points.
Wow.
And he's coming off like a cardiac arrest. I mean, not making light of that, but I mean, why?
Yeah.
So there weren't like 50 other players available that were better than that?
So with the combination of Bronny and now JJ Redick as the coach on Lakers, does that make them a championship caliber team?
No. That makes them maybe a 7 seed.
They might win the mid-season tournament.
They might.
And then do nothing the rest of the way.
Yep.
Well. How the turntables.
That's right.
We'll hear about this all again in 10 to 15 years on some Netflix documentary about nepotism in basketball.
It'll be a 30 for 30.
Mm-hmm. But, that is the American way, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Nepotism?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Speaking of American things, the University of Tennessee did win the College World Series. I've been calling them world champions. Go Vols. I don't know if anybody watches college baseball.
Is it really the World
Yeah, it's a World Series.
Because we think we're the best in every sport, but then we just sent off our
yeah.
football team to Japan and we lost.
Who's playing on that football team, though?
That's
my
true.
question.
Isn't that was it a under 20 league?
I'm not even sure, but I mean, I would think even our Pee Wee team should be Japan.
It's obviously nobody that's good enough to be pro.
I mean, I'm raising this flag, but I'm raising it with some sadness in my heart.
Yeah. We did do well in cricket, though, so I kind of makes up for it.
That's true.
Because there's nothing better than beating other countries and things that they're supposed to be better than us. Which I'm sure that's how Japan feels about us. But
exactly what
it's the exact opposite. Because our cricket team was like, how do we play this? Like the day of the game.
Oh, yeah.
And then whipped them. And that's probably what Japan did. Like, we're doing what?
And and they had to say, hey, we just beat you at American football. They had to make sure to get the American in there. Your sport that you invented, we just beat you at it.
This nation is clearly going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Just another reason.
That's why this election
you need to get to the polls.
So crucial.
It's because professional sports need to be patriotic and go on a break anytime that national events come up.
True.
Yeah.
So our national teams can be good.
Yeah. I mean, why weren't we sending Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey over there?
Seriously.
I know, right?
I'd actually root for them then.
Yeah.
Be awesome.
They complain about how they don't want to get injured or something.
Probably.
If you get injured for your country, that's the best thing you can do.
I'm thinking either way we win, because if we dominate, then we can brag. But if Kelsey and Mahomes lose, then we can laugh in their face.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the best of
how
both
did you
worlds.
lose to Japan? You
Best
guys
of both
clearly
worlds.
aren't as good as Tom Brady.
Well,
he would have never lost.
They probably wouldn't have even shown up. The other team, Tom Brady, nah, I'm good. Yes, Harley. We've got hey, if you will join one of our membership levels, we can silence my dog. So it would be helpful.
I'm a little worried about how you.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the details. Don't worry about the details.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
That's right. I'll just take care of it. So we're talking about freedom on our podcast. My dog has the freedom to bark in the middle of this recording.
He's exercising that freedom.
That's
His
right.
favorite one.
I think it is. Well, that's a great question. Do you guys have a favorite freedom? We live in a free country. We've been given the Bill of Rights, the 10 Amendments to the Constitution that outlines certain freedoms. But I think there's some that go far beyond that we get to enjoy. Mm-hmm. You guys have a freedom you just really love to participate in?
I really love greasy foods. That's definitely one of my freedoms. Although I feel like it was infringed upon a little bit when I was. Was it when I was in high school? Or was it right after? I don't know. Whenever Michelle Obama and then a British guy came in and removed all the good food from schools, I was like, man. What happened to the America I grew up in?
That's
where you could
right.
Get CC's pizza and cheese fries and a Chick-fil-A sandwich for lunch.
USA!
So bad. Well, didn't it? And they also tried to get rid of the Big Gulp, I think, in New York. And even New Yorkers are like, forget about it.
Can't do it with the Big Gulp. That's an American institution.
It is. Oh, man.
They're trying to minimize our biggie sizes and super sizes. Yeah. Can't do that.
Yeah. Hey, we need separation of food and state in this country.
We do.
That's right. Going to celebrate that with a few fireworks here. Boom. Check it.
Now Josh just looks. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see these cool effects that we're doing. Oh, lasers.
Yeah. That's one of the things I like as an American freedom is blowing crap up in the sky.
Oh,
you know, I mean, where else can you buy miniature bombs and launch them over your neighbors' houses and explode them so that hot, ashy debris falls on the roofs and potentially, I said ashy, potentially
right after a fart,
and
potentially causes a house fire.
And not only do that, but everyone cheer it on.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the most American thing.
Yeah.
Actually, funny story about that type of thing in particular. When I was in college, I lived in a house with two other guys, Greg Hayes and Ben Housecheck from First Baptist. And
What?
they, so Ben, after 4th of July, bought out every firework from like this firework tent. He like bought them all really cheap. He bought every bottle rocket they had. We decided to take a bunch of them, put them in a trash can with some gasoline at the bottom. And then we lit the gasoline,
Joe Dirt,
and it was like a giant like continuous cannon going off. Behind the house that we lived in, there was some trees, and over that trees was more houses, and we were firing them over the trees at other houses.
And you were in the city, right?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And then it felt very patriotic.
Did anybody complain or?
No, we immediately got in the car and went to Dairy Queen. Hung out there for a little bit. There was video evidence of it on Facebook at one point. I don't know if it's still there.
We got to find that.
Yeah. Jeff, what about you?
I am very thankful for the freedom to just wear whatever you want. And in fact, I'm a little warm in here, guys. I got to just...
Oh, yeah, take it off. Go ahead. Hey, wait. Where's Careless Whisper?
Oh,
yeah. All right. That's right.
We got to show that leg on camera, though.
Woo, those are some shorts.
Tan line.
Do you nair?
No.
Yeah.
There is hair there, but I'm using an effect on the camera today, so it is...
Man, if you are only listening to this...
I just took off my pants.
He just took his shorts off.
Yeah, and I have the freedom to do that.
Yeah, and now he's free.
Yeah. It feels pretty good.
Yeah.
YouTube might have something to say about that. I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, and banned. Actually, I don't know. I think YouTube's okay with sketchy behavior.
That's right. I mean, these are pretty much the same size as the shorts I run with through neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So
is there anything on underneath those?
Maybe.
Okay.
This is a family show.
So yeah. Let's not. We'll look at that during the break and see. All right. So we do have some great freedoms as Americans. We are a very unique nation in that. We're not the only nation out there that affords its citizens, some pretty good leeway in how they live. But I don't think there's any other country that reaches the extent that we do in the United States. So, but just a general question: when we think about freedom as being American, that American freedom, like, what is that? What does that mean to have freedom? We talk about it all the time. Any thoughts?
I mean, there's a lot of things, but we have the ability to pursue the things that we want to pursue, to worship, how we want to worship, to raise our families the way that we want to raise our families, and it's not dictated, controlled by anything, and it's a beautiful thing. And we talked about jokingly some of our fun freedoms, but we have the ability to really carve out a life. And again, I know we'll talk about Christian, the Christian side of this, and what God, God's expectations and reasons for freedom. But we really have the freedom to kind of do whatever we want at the end of the day. Obviously, there are laws, but we can really build a life according to how we deem fit, and that's everybody. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about opportunity or nepotism or anything like that, but we have the ability to pursue those things that we love, we cherish, and we want to build for our lives.
Yeah, I think that's that's kind of the key thing that American freedom historically, and the way we think about it, is built on, is the ability for us to live and not be told how we should have to live our lives based on the way someone else thinks. it's kind of up to everyone's own personal leanings and how they feel, and they get to make that choice for themselves. And I think that's one of, like, when you read our government documents, the Bill of Rights or the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, that's kind of what it all goes back to, is kind of every man is free and has these undeniable rights as a human to be their own person.
Yeah. And the phrase, what in the Declaration is, we're endowed by our Creator with these unalienable rights. I don't know what that word means, so I like what you said. But life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's kind of the all-encompassing freedom that we have, that we can pursue the life we want to pursue. We have the liberty, the freedom to do so, and pursue the things that make us happy. We're not getting into any spiritual context yet with that. So whatever it is that makes people happy outside of, is it going to hurt or harm someone else? We have that freedom, which is really, really amazing. And to disparage, I think, that freedom, man, really takes for granted the context of the nation we've been born into, because there's not really anything else like that. And America, for let's simplify 250 or so years of freedom. Is that right? Maybe almost 300 years of freedom. The whole thing started because they didn't want overreach of government. So it's pretty cool to have a nation that has been designed from the get-go of, man, what do the people really want? Like, we want them to be able to live their lives. And so there are these 10 specific rights, if you will, that are outlined in the Bill of Rights. And the one of those is that we have the freedom of religion. And that's something I think that's misunderstood in our culture by some. The whole idea of separation in church and state. We're not going to get into that, but we can kind of.
We have a whole episode on that, actually.
I think we did do an episode on that. That's right.
Listen to it.
So
go all about it.
Go check that out. It's probably not what you think, but we do have in America the freedom of religion. Basically, the government cannot establish a state church and say, this is what you have to be. You have to be Baptist or Presbyterian. And again, Britain had that. So as Christians, we live in a nation where anybody is free to pursue whatever religion they want. Mm-hmm. And at times we might think, man, it'd be awesome if it was an established Christian religion in the U.S. That'd be fantastic. But is freedom of religion, is that really a good thing? Or is it something that that can compromise our Christian convictions? Like if all the other religions are allowed, could that compromise how we live, or does it? So what about that? What about that freedom of religion? Where's its positive for us?
I think it's an interesting argument when people say, because I feel like that conversation comes up a lot in our culture now, where Christians specifically are saying that it'd be really great if our country would just was just specifically a Christian country, and they're really supportive of things like Christian nationalism, things like that. And I always think of how slippery a slope that is, because the whole reason of separation of church and state and the whole reason of freedom of religion is so you can't, because when you do that, whose one interpretation or personal convictions dictates what that version of Christianity is, if it's a government mandated thing, and it becomes a thing that eventually becomes a tool for oppression, and that's what we don't want it to be, and that's what it was historically. One of the reasons that people fled Europe and the England in particular, but in the early days and colonialism and into America. So it's something that to keep those things separate, I think, is a vital thing to keep us from being forced to believe or go with something that is against our own, conviction from the Holy Spirit, which I think is a very important thing that everyone needs to needs to think through things through themselves and come to those conclusions. And you can't do that if you are being told what is the wrong and right thing to do.
Yeah, because what if it was Greg Locke's version of Christianity?
No,
We had to hear too.
I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ryan. I mean, yes, it would be awesome if this was a Christian nation, but not by force, but by choice, that everyone in the USA loved Jesus and wanted to follow after him. That would be awesome. And that's really, I think at the heart, if you ask most Christians, that's ultimately what we desire, but we can't force everybody. And so if we instituted Christianity into things, it does become what Ryan just talked about. So I get asked all the time, being in the role of a chaplain, what do I think about the Muslims being able to have their service and the Jewish service being able to happen and celebrate their holidays. And, while I have my beliefs, and obviously I'm a Christ follower, and those are my beliefs. I believe in Jesus. I believe he is the way, the truth, the life. I'm thankful that those other religions have the freedom to practice. Now, I want those people to know Jesus and what I believe to be the truth, but I am thankful that our nation gives them the ability to practice, because that means that I have the freedom and ability to practice, which I think is a great thing. Now, if we didn't have that, I want to say that I would still follow after Jesus, because, I mean, it's obviously what I wholeheartedly believe, and it's changed my life. But it'd be a very different context. So it's a blessing from God to be able to live in a place where we have that freedom. And so when we talk about freedom of religion, I do think it's a good thing. I'm thankful that we have it. The only time I think that we would go down that slippery slope of sort of combining thoughts and ideas of say, Christianity with Islam or Buddhism or whatever, is if we began to, not necessarily like as a nation, as an American, not give them their opportunity to worship, but as we as Christians decided, what they're worshiping is no different than what I'm worshiping, or seeing it on the same level as their faith is the same in terms of truth at the end of the day. And I think we know how to separate that out, but I think our culture sometimes as a whole, especially those who are not very religious, sometimes can fall into that trap. And so I think to those who aren't religious and maybe seeking, sometimes that can be, there can be some elements of that I think can be harmful, but that's why it's our job as Christians to present truth at the end of the day. And I think that's part of our responsibility, living in a free nation, to make sure that we respect other religions, but we still obviously preach the truth of Jesus Christ.
Well, yeah. So that freedom of religion and freedom for everyone to worship and believe what they feel is true. Part of that in our Bill of Rights is also the freedom of speech, which allows us the freedom to tell people what we think and to, spread the gospel. And I feel like that's a very important piece of that, that's what we need to focus on as Christians. Is our freedom is not only the freedom to worship what we want to believe, but it's the freedom to tell other people what we believe, and to the glory of God, to spreading the spread of the kingdom. I think that's the really important thing that comes to with our freedoms that are allotted us by the government.
Yeah, and Jesus even spoke to. Paul even spoke to, and God did through Paul, the purpose of government. And, it's to punish evil and praise good, and then to render justice. Like that's the government. And nowhere in there does it say to lead spiritually, right. the people. It's to do those things. And when a government does kind of encroach into those, that realm of here's what you should believe or here's what we're going to do, nations that we've seen do that, like it's a terrible train wreck. So if we want to have freedom to be Christians and to practice that and to speak about Jesus, we have to be okay with people who, as you're saying, believe differently, doing the same as well. That's how this works. And, the root of Christianity is salvation by grace, right? Faith in Jesus. And we believe that that's a decision an individual makes, and the Holy Spirit does the drawing. So whether it was established as a Christian church or not, it wouldn't change anything other than it might keep people from taking those true steps of faith, because they would say, yeah, we're Christian because it's our country. So kind of with that as an understanding, like we are in a country that was founded with some Judeo-Christian values. I wouldn't necessarily say we are a Christian country today at all. But we have the freedom to live as Christians in this country. So we want to talk in part 3 just about, okay, how then do we leverage the freedom that we have as Christians? How do we leverage that to celebrate and to share the gospel, to spread the gospel? And what does freedom as a believer, what does that mean for us? So there's freedom as an American, and then there's freedom that comes through Christ as a Christ follower. And then how do we put those things together to share the gospel? So that's coming up in part 3. Thanks for being with us tonight. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Hey, DudeFax family. It is so good that you're listening to this podcast. Hey, just to let you know, I don't really advertise it a whole lot on the podcast, but hey, I write, and it's one of my passions, and I have published 3 books, and I want to encourage you to check them out. One of them is called The Chaser. This is probably the one I'm the most proud of. It is the longest of the 3, and it is a thriller. It's also a love story, but it's got an incredible message to it. I was honored to work with the team at Westbow Press to publish this, so check it out. Great book. I also wrote a story that is probably more of a kid's story, like middle school type humor. It also includes a lot of my middle school stories in it. It's a funny story, good story for kids, but also adults will love it as well. Good 80s and 90s references in here. And then here is a devotion book. It's a collection of a lot of devotions that I put up on one of my personal blogs, and it's myself and my family that brought these together. You can get all 3 of these books on Amazon.com. You can also go to my page, jefftilden.com, and get all of these books and purchase them. And hey, if you wanted me to write a message in one of them for you, which I don't know, I'm not that big of a deal, but if you did, just send a note to the DudeFax team, and I will be glad to do that. I would just love for you to check it out and get your feedback and see what you think. For now, continue enjoying this awesome podcast. All right, let's go. All right. Welcome back to part 2. Josh is now George Washington. So if you're watching on YouTube,
Yep.
He's looking really good. He looks a lot like Nate Bargatze in that SNL skit.
Yeah. Oh, yes. That's a great one.
Yeah, where he's talking about the metric system and how it's ridiculous.
Yeah. If you haven't seen that, you need to go see that.
Yep. And the rules of football that make no sense. So those are the things we love about our country, right?
I actually just dyed my hair white and got some curls. It
looks good.
I thought it looked nice.
Yeah.
Thought I'd make America.
Oh, yeah. When you were wearing your hat in the first part, Josh, it was oddly satisfying every time you turned to where the stripes matched up with the flag behind your head. Yeah. And I kept watching for that. That was probably
I loved when you were doing the background effects, your hat was disappearing. Now that really looks like colonial.
So yeah, if you are not watching on YouTube, you might be missing out on some cool things. But you know what? You also might be practicing what is very popular now, trending around the world on TikTok, Instagram. It's on the news, But have you guys heard about people, particular guys, that are raw dogging flights?
This makes me uncomfortable.
Is that somehow related to Joey Chestnut?
Unfortunately, is not related to Joey Chestnut, and it's not like what you might think. That is the term that's being used on the news. But what it is, and I call it puttying because of Seinfeld. David Putty goes on a flight from Europe back to the United States, and he's with Elaine, and he's just staring at the back of the seat. And he's just kind of got this introspective look, but he has no music, no book, no magazine. He's not eating or sleeping. He's just staring at the back of the seat, and it drives Elaine bonkers. She's like, "You're just going to sit there and stare at the back of the seat?" And he's like, "Yeah." But this is what guys are doing on flights, and it's become a sort of a challenge to see how long you can just sit and stare. You cannot sleep. You can't use any form of entertainment, so you can't watch a movie, read a book, a magazine, listen to music. You can't eat. Some guys are even saying they're not drinking water, but they're seeing how long they can do this. And we've got guys doing like international flights on this. What do you guys think?
Well, we're talking about we're a free country. People can do whatever they want to pursue happiness, and they can be idiots. They have that freedom. So,
but the international flights, though, I'd be like once they cross over,
they have to wait.
Then they lose that freedom. You got to stop that crap.
In an article that just came out, People magazine released this just a couple of weeks ago. But a UK-based DJ named Woodini, he announced in a video posted June 4th that has now more than 13 million views, that he just raw dogged a 7-hour flight, a new personal best. No headphones, no movie, no water, nothing.
Why?
Yeah.
Who, like, is this? I don't understand. It's not even just this. It's like anytime something becomes like a challenge or trend, I'm like, who are you doing this for? What's the point? Doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, are you trying to prove something to yourself?
I think it's all
maybe.
We mentioned in the break. I think we are so hungry for validation on social media, that you'll do something like that. I mean, you're not doing it because you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
The enjoyment comes from all the views you're going to get or all the likes you're going to get. Because everybody else is like, really? You got movies and food? Man,
that's dumb.
It's like, why are you willingly trying to take the experience of being on a Greyhound bus in the 1950s? Like,
Oh, yeah.
well, and I saw something on the socials recently. I wish I thought to look it up for this to have the details right. But there was a guy that posted something along the lines of how he was on a really long flight, and all he did was watch movie after movie after movie after movie, and he was kind of documenting that. And so I think he was trying to get through as many of them that the airline provided. And that guy,
so he's doing the opposite.
That guy's a hero.
Oh yeah.
So what would you call that?
Wet catting?
Cook
Clothes
catting.
dogging?
No. Cook cats. Yeah.
So an Australian musician, Torn Foot.
What's up with these names?
Yeah. This was just this week, June 25th. Just raw dogged it. 15-hour flight to Melbourne. No music, no movies, just flight map. I counted to 1 million twice. Why didn't he just count to 2 million?
Yeah.
He just wanted to stop at 1 million?
Yeah, I mean, it makes it sound more impressive if you count to 2 million.
I think that's
these guys are
wasted
basically
opportunity.
7-year-old me in the dentist office waiting for my mom.
But that's by force.
I don't know. Have any Americans done this?
Probably.
Because it seems like it's
user named Michelle, who did it during a 5-hour trip from New York to San Francisco.
Well, that tells you all you need to know about that person.
She also
They're
said
traveling between New York and San Francisco.
She also said she's never seen so many people raw dogging a flight in her life.
I just can't hear that.
So I will not be participating in this trend. I don't know about you
I
guys.
will say it's kind of similar to the thing I do sometimes where, like, during like a work day or something like that, I'll just be sitting there and like
raw dog a work day.
Well, that's usually what it is when I don't wear socks to my shoes or something. No, but like you just stare at the wall and just like your brain shuts off and you just like you're not thinking, like you kind of zone out for a minute. I feel like it's that, but like on a larger scale.
Yeah. Ryan, you need to start the trend of raw dog. Raw dogging a work day.
I'm gonna walk into the office and tell everybody I'm raw dogging it today, guys.
Raw dogged an entire work shift. Didn't do any work. 8 hours, just stared right at the computer. Didn't even fire it up.
Clocked out when I left.
That sounds like it would have been a great bit on the office.
Well, they're coming back out with it. Maybe you can submit that as an episode.
Yeah, I think we need to put this video up so people can start. That can go viral. So speaking of news and freedom to do things, also this week the U.S. Supreme Court is now allowing the government to request removal of misinformation on social media. So this permits the government to call on tech companies to remove false information, especially in light of this upcoming presidential election, which is interesting. So, I mean, is this a violation of free speech? Yeah. But it just got me also thinking, like, what's the weirdest falsehood that you've heard on the internet?
Well, first, the Supreme Court thing, a little curious in the timing of that. Yep. Kind of keeping with the America kind of theme here and presidents and elections and all. I don't know if this is weird. It's just all the stuff that comes out anytime Biden kind of bends over that he's pooping his pants.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and
absolutely no evidence for it.
No.
Just saying, like, look at that. He looks like he's pooping his pants.
Yeah, there was one recently where he was at something, and he turns around and he kind of bends over, and the truth is that he's looking for his chair, more likely. Now he's being an old man about it, but
because he is an old man.
And it's awkward anyways, but you're like, yeah, he just stopped to poop his pants and everybody was running with it. And I was like, I hate that stuff. Yeah. But I remember Snopes, snoping the Babylon Bee.
Oh yeah.
And the articles that they were putting out. If you're not familiar, the Babylon Bee is satire. That's what they do. It's false stuff. But Snopes started taking it and declaring all their articles as being false. It's like, well done.
Babylon Bee was like, that's the joke.
That's right.
But they've arrived.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think Snopes is probably super busy these days.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder what Snopes is. Like, it used to be just like husband and wife team. I think they've like expanded out and have like a whole team of researchers and stuff.
But I used to go to Snopes a lot, like in the early days of internet, Twitter. When you hear a story like, okay, is this real? Now I just assume everything's false.
Well, I did go to Snopes today for this bit, and we were talking about a certain internet trend or TikTok trend before the show. And it talked about a certain woman who got fired from her job as a preschool teacher, and Snopes said that is false.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I believed it. When I read it, I was like, well, she looks like she could be a preschool teacher, and I could definitely see her getting fired for that.
So did Brenda. Brenda read that too and was telling me, and then I was like, well, I saw like a video talking about it, and then like no one ever is like sure of anything online. I feel like anytime I see somebody in the comments is like, well, that's not really true. And I'm like, I don't know who to believe. Yeah. Social media is just all fake news.
I will commend Elon on X for the community notes.
Oh yeah.
Well done, Elon.
Commending.
Because that's, that just lets people kind of, and then they give sources and all for it. But yeah, that's the thing. Like you read so many things if you're on Facebook or especially Twitter, and it provides exactly what you're wanting to see, and people just take it as truth. That's true. That's true.
I remember for the longest time, I heard, I guess online was where I heard it, but that Bono of U2 said at like several of his concerts that every time he claps, a child in Africa dies. And forever,
Stop clapping.
forever. Yeah, that's what somebody said. That, he did it a couple of times, and then somebody yelled out at his concert, "Well, stop clapping." And I thought, that's just like, why do people still listen to you too if he's doing this? Sounds terrible. But that turned out, I found out years later, was false.
So he was not killing children in Africa.
So no, he's not killing children in Africa. But somehow that became an internet rumor that people began to believe. And it also makes you think about, you guys know about the Mandela effect.
Oh, yeah.
It's those things that we just sort of believe to be true, or like that popular culture, everybody just sort of assumes is true. Mm-hmm. Like lines in movies are like that, like the famous line in Star Wars where everybody says, "Luke, I am your father," and that's not the actual line.
Oh, yeah. Which is just misquoted.
Yeah. But there's more serious like news stories that often end up that way too, which is kind of interesting.
Well, I wanted to share one of the things. When I knew we were doing this, I was looking back through some Snoops things, and I thought this one was pretty hilarious. Snopes, sorry. Oh. Let me just pop this over here so everybody can see it.
Just in case it's Snoops. Oh, yikes.
Yeah. So for you guys listening, it's a picture from probably like the 20s or 30s of a young girl, like a toddler kind of age girl in a trash can. And it's graded so you can see through it. And there's a sign that says, "Dispose of your ugly children here." And so that was going around and people were like, I can't believe they did this back then. Shots fired! But it was just a manipulation of this picture. Let's see if it'll come up here. Yeah. But the sign originally said, "Please keep off the grass." But there's still a kid in a trash can.
Somebody did that.
Somebody put their kid, and she's not the most pleasant thing to look at. I'll agree with that. But
it was in the 20s.
It was in the 20s, right? So I find that's the thing. People can make things look like or say anything you want it to. Yeah. But the fact that someone would believe that there was a disposal bin for ugly kids.
My favorite one was one that I did one time where it was a picture.
You started an internet rumor?
Yeah, well, I didn't start it, but I perpetrated it on my Facebook. But it was a picture of Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh yeah.
It's like, if you don't scroll, like if you scroll, you don't love Jesus, or something like that. And Jesus, so many well-meaning elderly people in my family that
I think that's
were like, amen.
I think that's been shared a lot.
Yeah,
it kind of had a lot. You should have trademarked that.
Yeah, for real. I like
it wasn't my original idea. I had seen it before, so. But,
well, and so people for years believed that the Monopoly man had a monocle. He does not have a monocle.
He doesn't have a monocle?
Nor did he ever have one.
Which makes me think he's not nearly as rich as he was trying to appear to be.
He just walking around
really
with
rich to have a monocle.
That's right. Yeah. I want him to have a monocle.
Mr. Peanut. Mr. Peanut has a monocle.
I think so.
Okay, maybe that's what we were doing.
Yeah. He's really fancy.
Well, speaking of things that are sometimes untrue on the internet, what about comments? While I look for the comments thing. There we go.
It's time for comments.
Are you kidding me? We always have very truthful, meaningful comments, especially when we talk about flat Earth.
That's what I was going to say. Flat Earth, like the most false thing I've ever heard online. Yes. Okay, sorry.
Oh yeah. Last week we talked about our own DudeFax Buc-ee's style gas station and what things we would put in there. We asked for some input. Standing Coffee, our friend of the show, hopped in our comments on Instagram and said, "Gotta add a biscuit bar, honey, jelly, fruit, molasses, gravy, you name it. It would be amazing." And I just want a biscuit.
Taste the biscuit. Taste the goodness of the biscuit.
At Waffle House, you get them smothered, covered, scattered, all the different things. Chili and gravy.
I'm still waiting on Hunt Brothers to do our biscuits and gravy pizza.
Yeah, get on it, Hunts. I'm wearing your shirt.
Let's do it.
It's like, get on that.
I just love that they came out with a shirt that says pizza filled in with the American flag.
Yeah.
That's why Hunt Brothers is awesome.
Even though it wasn't invented in the United States.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry.
What, pizza wasn't?
Yeah.
I mean, good pizza was.
Yeah.
That's true.
So the other hot topic from last week was talking about Bill Belichick and his 24-year-old lover, as some might say.
And that is true. We were hoping that was a false, but Snopes confirmed.
No.
Yeah. But we did get some very, very passionate comments about it. So Sand and Coffee also commented on this one, said, as a father of a 20-year-old, that's a resounding no for me. Which I think sounds like is a good dad instincts there.
That's right.
It's probably a good thing. This Mr. Elder Millennial on TikTok said, if they are happy, I'm happy for them. I'd ask him for box seats for sure, though. Which, box seats to what? Because he's no longer
That's
the
right. He
coach
doesn't
of the
have a
Patriots.
job. I actually thought about responding with that, but I was like, that'd be nice.
Yeah. He doesn't have a job. That's why he's dating a 24-year-old.
He has nothing else to do.
But is he only okay with it because of the potential benefits? Like, what if it's just some
That's
other
true, right?
78-year-old man?
Yeah. Some
Yeah.
8-year-old man who's a greeter at Walmart or
Yeah,
something like that.
with no money
Yeah.
and no box seats, except for the box he sits on at Walmart.
Maybe that's the box seats he's talking about.
Ah, do you have any milk crates I can sit on?
And then, before I get to the last person here, Tyler, who is not our Tyler,
Not TB.
different
Not
Tyler,
a bag of rolls.
yeah, said on TikTok, he said, as a Bills fan, I'm throwing hands with that MF, which I think is a stand-in for curse word there. So, a little aggressive, but
Yeah.
I get it.
It's not maiden female.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Malarkey baloney.
Yeah.
Did he put MF or did he write it out?
No, he said MF.
Okay.
Oh.
Yes, we
Like,
don't know what
the
it
actual
means.
letters
Yes.
MF. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad he had some restraint.
Maybe he meant Mister, and he just like mistyped it.
Ah.
Instead of the R, he hit the F. Yeah,
That's
probably-
probably it.
Mr. Friendly.
throwing hands with that Mister. And let's see. Okay, so We the People on TikTok was our most active commenter about this whole situation, which I think he was misunderstanding where we were coming from in this whole situation.
Which we were just joking.
Right, yeah, right.
This is a comedy podcast.
We were not making a comment one way or another whether it was okay for him to be dating her or vice versa. But We the People said, she's the predator at this point. She's trying to get the money when he dies. I had deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan by 24, but somehow you can't see her as an adult that can make decisions. So interesting.
Jesus, just
Is he talking about us? Like, we can't see her as an adult making
I think
decisions?
so. Yeah, I think he's trying to say that we were like saying that Belichick
She is an
was
adult.
like.
I don't feel like we said that she didn't know what she was
But
doing.
adults
Yeah, I
can
don't-
make dumb decisions.
Mhm.
It's like she's an adult, but also I don't know
Not.
if you remember when you were 24,
Mhm.
but I was definitely not making the
Yeah.
best of decisions in my life at that
Yeah.
age. So
I was trying to beat
Mhm.
Grand Theft Auto instead of studying for Greek.
which
Yeah.
is I don't know.
Okay.
I think I'd probably go with the Grand Theft Auto.
Well, we the people, we do thank you for your service.
We do. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, wrong button.
It's like, what?
I was trying to see if he had another good one in this. He went on a couple tirades here.
Is this all on the same?
Yeah, all on the same like thread. I said, yeah, don't pretend like she couldn't get an age-appropriate, successful guy. She's just as weird as him. Flip the script, and everyone is fine with Madonna and Jada, which I don't understand. And Jada is like Smith,
Yeah.
Will Smith. He's not like that much difference in age in her.
Yeah.
And
Well, the son is.
the double standards of equality.
It's still weird, even if
Yeah,
the
it's
lady.
like I don't think it's. I think it's weird with Madonna too. I don't know why he's bringing that up. Yeah, it's weird regardless.
It is odd.
I think we discussed like one that I thought was weird. That was like a reverse situation.
Did he say when he served? Like,
No, he just
so we don't
said-
know how old he is or whatever.
He said Iraq and Afghanistan, so I'm assuming that
Okay.
he's probably like my age, probably like 30 or something, mid-30s.
Well,
You and
it
I may
depends
have
on
deployed together.
it depends on which Iraq and Afghanistan, because there was the Gulf War, which was Afghanistan, definitely.
True.
And if that's it, he's probably 50.
No, the Gulf War was not Afghanistan. It was Iraq, but that was like Saudi Arabia.
They went
Iraq,
into didn't they go into
Like
Afghanistan to get?
No, Afghanistan wasn't until after 2000.
All right, I'm wrong. Okay, but I just
Russia was
wonder,
in Afghanistan in the 80s.
okay. I just wonder if he's jealous that he's not scored a 24-year-old.
Or he's jealous
Cheerleader.
that he hasn't scored Bill Belichick.
Maybe
Hey,
it is a new army or Marines or whatever.
yeah, that's true.
So,
But yeah, so that was our comments for the week. I think
like it.
I think we have some good fodder from our conversations in this part on this week. So
Yeah,
I would encourage anyone listening
Get in,
or on
comment.
our TikTok
Yep.
go out there and
Yeah.
leave us your comments.
especially Ryan's new trend that he just invented.
Yeah.
That's gonna make it. So hey, before we get into part 3, we're being very patriotic here today. We want to share the top 5 most patriotic countries in the world. Who do you guys think are the top 5 most patriotic countries in the world, if you had to guess?
I'm gonna throw out a wild one here.
all right.
That's the one I thought of when we were talking about this in the break. I'd say North Korea.
Oh yeah,
North
Yeah.
Korea did not make the list.
Oh,
Really?
that's surprising.
They weren't even in the top 10.
Really?
the poop balloon people.
Yep.
I see all
No
the
poop.
videos from them, and it's just them marching. I
Yeah,
would have thought they would have made it.
everybody's into it.
So again, they don't care about falsehoods on the internet.
Have you seen
They
videos
don't
of
have the
how?
internet, so.
Have you seen videos of how people just respond to? I can't keep up with the names there. Kim Jong Un. I don't know which
Yeah.
one it is right now. Like
One
when
of
he
those.
comes into some sort of social event or theater for something, and people they've choreographed what people will do as he comes in, and it's weird, like dance moves, and like it's all there's something in the Kool-Aid
Yeah.
out there.
That's weirder than Belichick.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think so.
no, it's way weird.
So, what about the Vatican?
Vatican is not on the list.
Because they're all about the Pope there. I
That's true.
figured they would. Okay.
This is the countries were surveyed, and this is based on the amount of people in that country who said that their country is the best. So
Hmm.
that's how they determine most people.
China?
China is not on the list.
Switzerland.
Really?
Switzerland not on the list.
Tells
Oh.
me the people of these countries don't really think too hot about their.
Yeah.
Um,
The number one country, 41% of the people said their country was best.
Wow.
really?
Okay. Well,
Well, America's got to be on there.
yeah,
right?
America's on there. I'm assuming they're
America?
number one.
It's number one.
Okay,
Oh,
that's right. We
yeah,
win.
baby.
We win. That's right. We are number
Only
one.
41.
America!
Yeah.
Perfect. I mean, we are undefeated in the world
That's true.
wars, so
That's true.
that's right.
All right, so USA is number one. Can you guys fill out the rest of the 5?
England.
England is not in the top
Wow.
5. However, they are number 8.
Okay.
Mm,
Australia.
Australia is number 3.
Okay.
okay, that makes
So
sense.
34%.
Mhm.
They seem like happy people.
They do.
Yeah.
They're proud of their shrimp on the Barbie.
Canada.
Canada, nowhere to be found.
That's right. You're just,
They wish they were
you're
us.
just America light.
I want to say France, but with all the protests and stuff going on there, I don't know.
Nope. No French.
Um,
Some of these will
South
surprise
Africa.
you. No South Africa.
say some of them will surprise us.
Yes. So I'm going to give you number 5.
Okay.
We actually mentioned this country in some of our discussion already. They just popped out, but I don't think you guys would get this. Saudi Arabia is number 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So can you guess 2 and 4?
Are there any other? Israel?
Israel, nope.
Are there any other like Middle East countries?
Yes. Well, sort of, yeah,
Dubai.
in that area.
United Arab Emirates.
So I will tell you, one of the top 5 is one of the largest countries in the world,
Russia.
and population,
Population.
has even surpassed China, but I think China has now surpassed back this country.
India?
India is number 2
Wow.
on the list.
Okay.
Yep, 36%.
Wow.
Really? Wow.
Have they seen video of other countries?
I mean, they have Bollywood.
That's true.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why. We have Hollywood, they have Bollywood. We're the top 2.
Hmm.
Yeah. It makes sense. They go to the top 1 and 2. Like,
Yeah.
they come here to be doctors and.
So it's the U.S., India,
Australia,
Australia.
and 5 was Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia.
So somewhere in there.
Number 4, you probably won't. I mean, even if I gave you like 5 minutes, you might not guess
Give
it.
us the letter.
T.
Tijuana. No, it's a
Turkey?
It's not Turkey.
Turks and Caicos. No, it's a.
Trying to remember high school geography.
It's beautiful there.
Is it?
In certain places.
Have you been there?
Yes. I visited there. Beautiful beaches.
Trinidad and Tobago, Turks and Caicos. I mean, those are all Virgin Islands, aren't they? It's the only thing I know that has a beach.
Nope. This is over in
Tasmania.
Asia.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Thailand.
Thailand.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep. Thailand is
Yeah,
number 4.
that's a cool place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, number 6, Philippines. 7, Indonesia. We already said 8 is the UK. 9, Denmark, and 10, Malaysia. So,
Wow.
which the Malaysian flag is very similar
Yeah,
to our flag.
that's probably
by the
why.
way. So two of these
Okay.
types of flags in the top 10.
Yeah.
So those are your most patriotic countries. And we're going to talk more about our patriotic country and also freedom coming up next in part 3. So stick around.
All right, welcome back to part 3, DudeFax Patriots. We're so glad that you're here, that you have stuck around with us. We're going to get into the last part of our conversation about freedom. We talked a good amount in part 1 about just freedom as Americans, what that is, what it looks like, what that freedom is, even in specifics. But as we mentioned, there is also a thing as Christian freedom, which honestly is a lot more potent, more powerful, more important in our lives as Christians than American freedom is as Americans. And there's a unique way that those freedoms align with each other and can support each other. But then maybe there's some potholes and roadblocks that might come up between the two as we're trying to follow Jesus. So we want to take some time to talk about first just what does it mean to be free as a Christian. Scripture talks about Christian freedom. We hear that referenced a lot in sermons. So let's just kind of take a step back. If we're talking about Christian freedom, like what is that? When you guys want to jump in on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's the idea that we're free from the bonds of sin. And again, that's churchy language, I know. But, the idea is that we sometimes struggle with doing things that we don't want to do. I think even people that aren't Christians feel the weight of that because of the consequences of their actions, which rightly so. God warns us about doing certain things and says, hey, don't do this. And part of that's because he knows there's going to be consequences for what happens. But the weight of that is huge. Guilt, shame, all of that. Jesus frees us from that. And so we are free not to be defined by a life living according to sin and to our weakness, but in Jesus, one being for the slate wiped clean, spotless before God, but then also in the power of the Holy Spirit as we live every day, saying, I don't have to go back to that old life. We're free. It's literally that image of we were imprisoned in chains, however you want to call it, to sin, and Christ has cut those chains. He's opened the door. We can walk out of the cell.
Yeah, I think too. Also, the other aspect of like our freedom as Christians is that we are free from the burden that is having to strictly adhere to, the laws, the Old Testament laws and practices, because they don't do anything for us. Like, we're free from them because our debt is covered. We don't have to, like in Galatians, Paul talks about circumcision in particular, but we're free from having to worry about those things, and that freedom allows us to then, go forward without the burden of that hanging over us. And the Christ, he really takes on that for us so that we can be free to can continue the spread of the gospel among the nations, and we don't have to worry about that. And I think that's the other important. We're free not only to continue and to not go back into our old ways, but we're also free in having to reconcile ourselves because we've already been reconciled.
Yeah, Galatians 5:1 says, "For freedom Christ set us free." And then Paul says, "Stand firm then, and don't submit again to a yoke of slavery." And we're talking about the law, the Old Testament law, root, 10 Commandments, and then all the other things that were thrown on top of that. I mean, it was a burden for God's people before Jesus came. There was a system of sacrifice which provided a kind of a covering of protection over God's people, but it was constant and unending. And, you put yourself maybe in the context of those first century Jews that are coming to faith in Jesus. You think it'd have to be really hard to break free of that mindset of, oh, well, I still have to this, that. And then, of course, circumcision was one of the big ones they hung on to. I don't know why. That would have been the first out the door.
How about new?
That's right. But they're bound up in that already. And so, Paul talking was like, hey, it's for freedom that Christ set you free, like, so that you're not just free from it, but now you can live in that and live a different way. But I think that's still an issue today. I know I struggle with that. Like I love legalism, and I really want to not love it, but at least in my own life, I struggle with. I still need, if God's really gonna, I'll still have those thoughts in my mind of, or I messed up, man, God probably really doesn't want to hear from me in prayer, or I can't sing in church this morning, or, whatever. I'll struggle with, those kinds of, sorry, I was distracted there for a second. I'll struggle with that type of thought. And I have to be reminded of this, like that, when I do that, I'm submitting myself underneath a yoke, a burden of slavery. I don't want to just assume people get that imagery. Yoke is what would go across the necks of two oxen, pulling a load. And so the people would see that, they understood that. I know we're not as agrarian anymore. You guys, if you live out in the country, you get it. But
yeah. They're like, oh yeah.
A city boy's like, isn't that what
Are you
comes
talking
in
about
an
an
egg?
egg?
Yeah. YOKE.
Yeah.
But yeah, we put a burden on ourselves that really Jesus has saved us from.
Yeah, because we lose sight of our identity, and we think too that we can do it in our own strength and power, and we think that we have to. So it's this idea: if I want God to be pleased with me, I'm going to do all these things, and that's how we get legalistic, because we start trying to define our own version of holiness when really we can't be made holy except through Jesus and what He did on the cross, and that's what we have to remember. to keep us from falling into those same patterns, whether it be the sin or whether it be trying to break free from that sin in our own power and being very legalistic about it. Because even somebody who is, maybe seemingly doing all the right things, but is still living according to, I'm trying to earn my way to heaven, even though I know it's only through Jesus. At the end of the day, they're still in that same boat as somebody who, knows the truth of Christ, but, doesn't submit to him and rely on that for salvation and continues to live just buried in that sin.
Yeah. So there is that end of, okay, we're freed from the bondage of sin, which is huge. We're freed from the burden of the law in that, so that it can sound like you get freedom to do whatever you want. I mean, that's not the case, but you're no longer judged by your ability to keep the law. You're judged by your relationship with Jesus. But it's interesting that a lot of the New Testament authors, Paul did it, James, Jesus's brother, half-brother, brother from another father, they identify themselves as a servant or a slave of Jesus. And so it is interesting, like Paul himself, he's talking about freedom. And then he's also identifying himself as a slave. And so mixed in that freedom is that freedom comes as we are following Jesus. Like we identify he is the ruler. He's the king. And he's a king that does not enslave us, but he frees us to follow him. And so there's not, we're serving him. It's not this servanthood idea. It's not a forced servitude, like, well, he's going to kill us or whatever if we don't follow. It's we know what he's done for us in freeing us from the bondage of sin.
It's a willingness.
It's a willingness. I want to serve him, and he sets the tone for what that is.
It goes back to that old illustration that we used in youth ministry all the time. It's that idea of, hey, I'm free to go and love whoever I want, but when I get married, or a young man, whenever he starts dating somebody, he can go out and date whoever he wants, but when he finds that woman that he enjoys being around, all of a sudden he is beginning to live according to meeting her needs, serving her in a way, and not choosing to use freedom to go date a bunch of other women, but to submit to this one and sacrifice for her. And so, in a much bigger way, obviously that's how it is with Jesus. We are free to choose whatever, but when we choose Jesus, we have a love for him to where we don't want to go and serve anything else. He comes into our lives and changes us to the point of where we want him. And so I think it's that idea of when Jesus talks about, if you want to follow me, you'll hate your family. It's not that you're literally hating, but it's just that there's so much passion and love for Jesus that it may appear to the world to be that. So much passion and love for Jesus that it may be, appear, for probably lack of a better word, that we're enslaved to him, but it's because we love him so much and we want to live according to his will and purpose.
Yeah, and that I think it's in Malachi where there's the phrase that Jacob he chose, but Esau he hated, and the idea is that he didn't choose Esau. And so for us, like to love Jesus, to follow him, to walk in that freedom is to choose him over even our family, and those closest. And you were hitting on something, because I think one side, if we talk about a double-sided coin of freedom, one side is the freedom from sin and from bondage, but then the other is a freedom to how we live. And I think that's what really gets abused more than anything. Is like, Scripture says everything is permissible, so we live in this freedom to kind of do and live how we want, and everything is permissible. That's in Corinthians, we get that, but Paul also says that not everything is beneficial, right? So let's talk about that end of Christian freedom. What's Paul getting at there? that everything's permissible, but not everything is beneficial. So as Christians, do we have the freedom to kind of go and do whatever we want to do?
We do, but there's always there's always a best choice. And this is really with things that are, I would say, really gray areas.
Like murder, not a gray area.
No, not at all. but things when, maybe watching a certain program on TV and talking about it, or I remember somebody having this conversation with me years ago, talking about how they don't play loud music that's rocking their car when they go up to a red light, because they don't want somebody to assume that, they're just, because people might have certain connotations with that. And, that may be legalistic, and I'm not trying to go down that road, but it's this idea of always, loving Jesus, loving people enough to where you're always making the better choice. It's like, yeah, I have the freedom to go and play my music however I want, and I'm not going to criticize anybody for that. But hey, maybe when I'm a pastor and I drive up to a stoplight and it's somebody that I know, I'm not going to crank it up. And that may be a bad example now, because I think, 20 years ago that might have made more sense. But
I do that now.
It's just,
but it's more because I turn my radio down anytime I slow down.
You can't hear.
Yeah.
But no, I just think there's always that better choice. And so we have to, remember that as Christians, but also live our lives out of love and service towards others. We were talking about Galatians and reading that out of Galatians 5, but 5:13 says, "For you're called to freedom, brothers, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another." So if we're going to serve other people and truly love them, we're going to choose not to do certain things because we don't want to confuse them, or we don't want them. We don't want to cause something to be in the way of the gospel getting to them. And that may mean that we choose to do things that we technically can do and that God would be fine with us doing. It's just we're making that better choice. And it's different from legalism, because I think legalism would say, never can do this ever. Yeah. It's wrong. It's sin. You're looking and making the more loving choice. What can I do to love others? It's not about me just indulging. It's about me doing what's best for the gospel and this person to know Jesus.
Well, it also frees us, the other part of that freedom is to be free from having to adhere to a specific set of rules that could hinder your ability to spread the gospel and could hinder your ability to make a connection with someone who doesn't think like you. And, I think that the Bible talks about that, especially with them dealing with going out to the Gentiles and things like that. They were wanting to not be held down by the restrictions of Old Testament law and being Jews, so that they, because they're free from that, they can then go out to these Gentiles that have different ways of life and different things that they do, and not be forced to adhere to these old ways of thinking that could make them seem like an outcast or hinder their ability to communicate with these people.
Yeah, Paul, in the context of that, of everything's permissible, but everything's beneficial. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the context of that is he talks about eating food. Is that they're eating food that's sacrificed to idols? That the Jews wouldn't do that, but the Gentiles would. Mm-hmm. And so if a Gentile invites you into our home and into their home, and that's what they serve, you eat it, because it's meat.
Right.
That's all it is meat. In a Jewish context, it may be a hindrance for them to share Jesus with other Jews if they invited a Jew into their house as a believing Jew and you serve meat because you have the freedom to eat meat sacrificed to idols. Well, you would immediately shut off the opportunity. They would have shut off that opportunity to talk about Christ. But it opens the opportunity for the Gentile. And I think one of the tired and used example of this, but I think where most of us go is if we're talking about something like alcohol use among Christians is, well, I have the freedom to. Well, is it beneficial? Well, it may not be, because it may cause someone to stumble. But what if you have the neighbor that's not a believer and you go to their house and they offer you a beer, and that having a beer with that person would allow a sit-down conversation. And you can always say no, I don't like the taste or whatever. But it's thinking through those things that, legalism is like, no. And then you almost act judgmentally towards that person.
Right. It's
I think.
well, I don't want that, and you shouldn't either because it's wrong. Like, that immediately like shuts down that relationship.
But and it's not just that. Like, I don't think we're giving our thought on alcohol tonight, but it's things like that we do have the freedom to participate in, to enjoy. I think it was Spurgeon that some guy was getting on to him for smoking a cigar or something, or he mentioned something in a sermon about it. And he's like, I plan to go home tonight and smoke a cigar to the glory of God. And I'm like, okay, I like that. That's fine. And, and I think you can do things like that in a way if your heart's in the right place, and you're really being grateful and thankful for the things God has provided or whatever. Yeah.
I had this conversation with a pastor recently that I went to lunch with, and he asked me about chaplaincy and said, I'm curious because the language in the military, they let it fly. So soldiers aren't going to shy away from using all sorts of colorful language. And he said, how do you deal with that? And I said, well, there's one of two ways. I've known chaplains that have called them out on it and said, hey, don't say that. That's wrong. I don't like that. But what I've also seen is those same chaplains have lost their opportunity to really pour Jesus into those individuals because they're like, I don't want to be around that guy. I've chosen to not say anything most of the time. The only time I might is if like my kids were little and somebody was saying a lot of bad things in front of
my kids around.
Hey,
like,
don't.
Yeah.
But most of it is I'm in your context. I'm a missionary in your context. I'm not going to harp on that. I mean, you don't know Jesus. What else am I supposed to expect out of this individual? I'm going to more focus on loving you, sharing Jesus with you, being different, but making that choice. So I have the choice to call him out on it, but I'm going to choose not to because that's not what's best. That is not what is important here. And I think that's definitely a way that we can apply that as well.
Well, and that means that you also don't betray your own personal conviction and lump in with them. You still are you, and you still follow what you think is right, but you're not sitting there acting judgmental towards them.
And you have to understand, this is maybe a whole other episode and topic, but people, when you're thinking about discipling somebody or leading them to Christ and then leading them in Christ, everybody's at a different spot, and God's probably working on them on something. And if you say, oh, you also need, then it becomes burden. It can become a burden to them. You don't know what they're going through. There's a guy that I've been mentoring at our church. I don't know if he knows it, but he has a little bit of a mouth on him. But we've been talking so much about he and his wife and marriage and some issues. Like, I don't even bring that up yet. And so we'll be in a conversation in the church lobby, and he may say a word that we would define as a swear word. I just keep rolling. Like, I don't want to act like it throws me at that moment, because that's not the time for that conversation. And there is coming a time to say, well, okay, what about our language? But in the context of our church, we have, and it's not just the Bridge. I'm sure every church is this, but we have guys come in that is their language, especially if they're military.
Yeah. And
me raising the church who is legalist, I have to just say, Josh, just act like they didn't say what they just said. Don't give yourself away. But yeah, so there's freedom to do all these things, as long as it's in line with God's word. It's not immoral. It's not unethical. It doesn't harm people. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying, Jeff, about thinking about what's benefit for the other person there. And that when we think of freedom like that, that has to be our first filter. It's not, I can do this. I'm going to do this. And so we're not, as Christians, we're not looking around for those gray area things to do them, because we can. If it arises in normal life, okay. But at every turn we have to be thinking, because all the commands are summed up into love God with all that you are and love others as yourself. Love your neighbor. So the best way for me to love people sometimes is to limit my freedom, not to express that.
There's still consequences for our actions. So,
yeah.
I can run a red light, and get destroyed, but technically I have my car, I can do it. There's consequences for it. And so, we have to be wise in how we do things, realizing there's still consequences. Just because we're free in Christ does not mean that we can just, do whatever, because we're still going to, receive these consequences, and sometimes bad consequences. So again, it's what is the best choice here?
Yeah.
And we always have to weigh that. And I think that's part of that discernment that the Holy Spirit gives us.
So I wanted to get to this question because we're getting close on time. The balance between American freedom and Christian freedom. So as believers, we are free to live free, and it's in a way it's so that we can most effectively share the gospel with people and they see what Christ has done with us. But do you think, is there a time when our freedom as Americans can hinder the way we spread the gospel, or can give us some issues?
I think that when you are so focused on your American freedoms that it becomes an idol in your life, I think that definitely is a point where it hinders your ability and your effectiveness for the gospel. I think that, that definitely impacts your Christian freedoms there, because yes, you have the freedom to do whatever, but and you may have that freedom as an American, but when you are so focused on that you're like, I'm an American, I should be able to do this, but to the point to where it negatively affects your spiritual witness to other people, I think that is definitely a negative there.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and I mean, I don't want to get too political, but guns are probably one of the biggest that hits the church. And it's our response when there is a mass shooting, and so many Christians are so protective over, well, I have the freedom, I have the right to bear arms, so don't take that away from me. And that's our focus, rather than there are people who just died here. As a Christ follower, I care more about that right now than, that freedom that we often idolize. And so that's just one example. There's a lot of them, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Is when we focus too much on that, I think it's a hindrance to the gospel. And then too, I think we become prideful just having the freedoms that we do. Obviously you talk to people who've lived in other countries that don't have the freedoms. I've got some friends in other countries that don't have the same freedom that we do. And, you read about missionaries in other countries, persecuted countries, just the humility that comes from having to, worship without that, and the commitment. And really, I think reliance upon God is that awareness, and heightened awareness of it is definitely there, much more than sometimes in the States, where we have this freedom and we take it for granted a lot of times, and we think, oh, I'm good. That can be a hindrance, because when we allow pride to get in the way, then we allow the enemy in. And I think that's when we begin to use our freedom selfishly and not for gospel purposes.
Yeah. And I think the same thing applies with what Paul was teaching about Christian freedom, that we can't let our American freedom be a hindrance to people coming. And it doesn't mean we go without the freedom, or we disparage the freedom, or speak badly or whatever. Like you have freedom to own a gun. And there may be, I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast that do. There may be people recording this podcast that do, but that can't become the end all, right? Is what do I put aside so that someone can know Christ? So there could be some hindrance. I think it's good to understand that and where priority is and what's most valuable. So how can we then use the freedom that we have as Americans to make much of Christ, to share the gospel? How can we leverage the freedoms we have?
Well, free speech is one, although I think, again, that's one of those that we have to be wise and discerning. Just because we have free speech does not mean that we should go out and be obnoxious.
Well, it's like you said, you're free, but you're not free from like consequences of things. So like just because you're free to say it doesn't mean you're free from the consequence of whatever you may or may not say.
Yeah,
but we do have the freedom, and so I see it in like any workplace. I mean, obviously in the Army. I'm free to operate as a Christian, but obviously, the things that I can say in a church service are a little bit different than the things that I can maybe get up and just say publicly in a, work setting. And I'm sure, obviously, Josh, you're at church, so but any workplace outside of church, that's the issue. But we use that freedom within the church. When you get up on the pulpit and you preach, to preach truth and to preach it boldly and unashamedly. And so I think it's using our freedom to preach Jesus and to be bold in it and not to shy away from it. Obviously, be smart in our context and to be discerning and make the best choices, but also to be bold with it, to not shy away and say, I'm afraid of somebody not liking me or agreeing with me in that kind of persecution, which is, very minimal compared to somebody who doesn't live in a free country and can receive real consequences for preaching the gospel.
Yeah, I think the other side of that freedom of speech as well is being a good listener. There's, I can't remember the guy's name. My kids listen to him. They'll watch his TikTok videos, but he goes on college campuses and
I know you're talking
yeah,
about the older guy.
Cliff.
I forget his last name.
Yeah.
His name's Cliff.
I love how he does this stuff because he'll let the students ask the question,
Right.
and he'll listen to them, and he's earning the right to be heard. I think we can learn from that not only do we have the right to say and to speak about Christ, but if you want to earn the right to be heard, you need to listen to others who might have something different and listen calmly and with a respect of the person. Now, they may not be speaking that way, but we need for them to know that we value who they are. And one of the great ways you do that is letting them express their speech and their opinion. And you can disagree. We have the freedom to we have the freedom to disagree. Just because you disagree doesn't mean you're a hater. And just because someone doesn't agree with you doesn't mean you have to write them off. Right. That's part of that freedom.
I think that's one of the main reasons I personally I'm so protective of our American freedoms, because I want other people to have that freedom to believe what they want to believe, because I want them to know that I care about their own agency and their own, right as a person to make their own choices. And I feel like part of that is showing, like, I care about you as a person. So, I want that to be reflected in the way that I want your freedoms to be protected as much as my own, whether I agree with you or not.
Well, and we are, in fact, the night we're recording this is the presidential debate that happened on Thursday before this released. That music really probably would go well with it.
I should play that music in like the in-between sections.
and people say, well, you're either Biden or you're Trump. And I'm thinking about, because thinking about protection of freedoms. I'm like, I'm not pro-Biden. I'm not pro-Trump. I'm pro-America.
Yeah.
Like, I want America to be this great nation. I want it to be that city on a hill. I want it to be a nation that honors God and honors the value of humanity. And so I think as a Christian, that's part of our responsibility as well, is to seek the welfare of the country in which we live. And so part of that is, if I want to protect it for me, I need to protect it for others. And that will open doors, I think, for us to speak about who Jesus is. If we're just hateful, angry people all the time, no one's going to want what we have.
Yeah.
Jeff, did you have anything you wanted to add in on that?
No, I think we covered it all.
Yeah.
Doing good.
So following Jesus is awesome. There's a lot of freedom that comes from that. You might be listening and feel like you're under that burden. You're in that bondage to sin. I think it's in John that if you're free, you're free indeed. How does that go? I'm butchering the verse. What is it? I have it here. Sorry. I'm not being John 8:36. So if the Son sets you free, you really will be free. So if you feel like you're struggling with that, you want to be set free, man, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about that. We'd love to pray with you. You can email us, thedudes@dudefaxpodcast.com. Hit us up on any of our socials. Feel free to direct message us. And we would love to jump into that conversation with you. Hey, thanks again for being a part of the Dude Facts. We love you guys. You make us who we are. That's right. You complete us.
Good timing.
That's all right.
I changed our mind. Careless Whisper needs to be the debate music.
Yeah, we love you guys. Thanks for being a part. Don't forget to like, share, comment. Check out DudeFax.com for merch and to see how you can be a sponsor of the show. Help us take this thing to the next level. All right, we salute you, Americans. You have the freedom to now go do something else with your day.